Truck smelled like diesel and fast food wrappers and 3 weeks of living out of a duffel bag. I didn't care. I was home 4 days early and I hadn't told anyone because I wanted to see my son's face when I walked through the door. That was the plan anyway. My name is Frank Decker. I'm 41 years old. I work pipeline. Natural gas mostly out in the Permian Basin in West Texas. 6 weeks on, 3 weeks off, sometimes longer if a section runs over schedule. The money's good. Better than good. They paid off the house in Shreveport, put my truck in the driveway, kept the lights on to 2 rounds of school fees and 1 busted water heater. I'm not complaining about the money. But the money costs something. It always does. My son's name is Aiden. He was 10 years old that summer. Brown hair he never let me cut the way I wanted. A gap between his front teeth and this habit of talking with his hands when he got excited about something. Legos, mostly, or the crawfish traps we'd set out back behind the house on weekends when I was home. He was a good kid. He is a good kid. I have to keep reminding myself to say that in the present tense because that summer did something to the way I think about time. Like I'm always bracing for something to go wrong with it. My wife, Sheila, and I had been separated for about 8 months when everything happened. Not divorced yet, just separated. The kind of separated where you still talk every few days about logistics and you're both pretending it isn't as bad as it is. Aiden was living with her full-time in the house we'd shared on Millbrook Drive. I had an apartment on the other side of town that I'd only spent about 11 days in total between rotation shifts. It wasn't much of an apartment. It was mostly a place to leave my mail. Sheila had started going to a church called Covenant Rise Fellowship sometime around February or March. She didn't mention it much at first, just in passing. I didn't pay close enough attention. That's the thing I come back to over and over. I didn't pay close enough attention. When my cruise supervisor told me on a Thursday afternoon that the section we were finishing had passed inspection early and he was releasing us for the weekend, my first thought was Aiden. Not the apartment, not the fridge I'd need to stock, not the laundry I had to do. Just my son. I called Sheila from the parking lot of the operations trailer and she picked up on the third ring. "I'm coming home early," I said. There was a pause. Not long, maybe 2 seconds, but I felt it. "Oh," she said. "That's wow, okay. Aiden is actually at a camp thing this week?" "But what camp thing?" "It's through the church. Youth leadership program. They do it every summer. It's really well reviewed, Frank. I did my research." She said that last part in the tone she used when she thought I was about to push back. "He's been there since Monday. He comes back someday." "Where is it?" "Out in Bossier Parish. They have a property out there, like a retreat center." I said okay. I said that sounded fine. I said I'd see her when I got back into town, and we'd figure out the handoff for the week. She said okay. We hung up. I drove for about 40 minutes toward Shreveport with the windows down, listening to the radio, thinking about whether I'd stop for a burger or wait until I got to the apartment. And then something shifted. I don't know what it was. I've tried to name it 100 times since then, and I still can't. It wasn't a thought, exactly. It was more like a pressure behind my eyes, some low-grade alarm my body decided to ring before my brain caught up. I took the exit toward Bossier Parish instead. I didn't have the address, so I called Sheila back. She didn't answer. I called again. Still nothing. I texted, "What's the address of the retreat center?" No response for 15 minutes. I pulled into a gas station and sat there with the engine running, and eventually I just Googled Covenant Rise Fellowship Bossier Parish Retreat and got a Facebook post from March that mentioned a property out on Rideau Road. Rideau's Road wasn't a retreat center. It was a farm. I found that out about 6 minutes after I turned onto it. It was a long private driveway, gravel lined with cedar trees that had grown in so close they scraped the sides of my truck. I drove slow. The property opened up into a cleared field on the left, maybe 2-3 acres of something low and green that I didn't recognize at first because I wasn't expecting it. Then I realized what I was looking at. Soybean rows. And children working them. There were maybe 12 or 15 kids spaced out through the rows, crouched down or bent at the waist, pulling weeds by hand under a Louisiana August sun that was sitting at about 94 degrees and had been all day. Some of them had water bottles. Some of them didn't. They were wearing long-sleeved shirts. I found out later this was a rule to prevent sunburn, but in 94-degree heat, a long-sleeved shirt is its own problem. They were dirty. Not summer camp dirty. Work dirty. I stopped the truck. I sat there for a moment, trying to reorganize what I was seeing into something that made more sense. A school project, a community garden thing. I don't know. I was trying to make it okay because I couldn't believe what it actually was. Then I saw Aiden. He was near the far end of the second row. I knew him by the way he stood, slightly favoring his left side the way he does when he's tired, something he's done since he was little. He was small against the open field, and he was moving slowly, very slowly, and he didn't look up when I opened my truck door. I said his name. He turned around, and I want to tell you that his face lit up the way it usually does when he sees me after a rotation, that gap-toothed grin and the running start he always takes. But that's not what happened. What happened was, he looked at me for a long moment with an expression I'd never seen on him before. Confused. Scared, maybe. Like he wasn't sure if I was real. Then he said, "Dad? They told me you weren't coming. They said you knew about this." I crossed that field in about 8 seconds. Up close, he looked thin, not alarming, not like something from a news story, but thin in the way that means someone hasn't been eating right for a while. He had dirt under his fingernails that had gotten into the creases of his knuckles. His lips were dry and cracked at the corners. He smelled like sweat and sun, and something else I couldn't name. Something flat and tired. The smell of a body that's been working past what it wanted to do. I put my arms around him, and I felt him go stiff for a second before he hugged me back. That stiffness lasted maybe half a second, but I have not forgotten it. It was the stiffness of a kid who'd been told not to expect things. "What do you mean they said I knew?" I said. He pulled back and looked at me. "They said you signed the forms. That it was a work program, that you and Mom both agreed." I had not signed any forms. I had not agreed to anything. I didn't even know about any forms. I looked around the field. There was a man standing near a wooden post at the edge of the property, wearing a polo shirt and a ball cap, watching us. Just watching. He hadn't moved since I'd gotten out of the truck. There was another child about 3 rows over, a girl who looked maybe 8, maybe 9, who had stopped working and was watching me too. Her eyes were big and very still. After a moment, she looked back down at the ground and kept pulling weeds. That was the moment it stopped being something I was trying to explain away. The man in the polo shirt walked toward us. He had the walk of someone who's used to being in charge of a space. Deliberate, unhurried, like he was giving me time to understand that this was his property and I was a visitor on it. "Can I help you?" he said. "I'm Aiden's father." "I can see that." He smiled. He had a good smile, the kind that's been practiced into naturalness. "We weren't expecting you until Sunday. The program runs through." "What program?" I said. "Who authorized my son to be doing field labor?" He kept the smile. "The families all signed participation agreements. It's part of the I didn't sign anything." I said it flat, and even because I was trying very hard to stay that way. "My son is 10 years old. He's coming with me. Right now." Something moved behind the man's eyes. The smile stayed, but it cooled. "Mr. Decker. Frank Decker." "And you are?" He introduced himself. "I'm going to call him the director because I don't want his name in my mouth." He said he'd need to make a call before releasing Aiden to me, that there were procedures, that the participation agreement specified a formal checkout process. I told him he could make whatever calls he wanted, but Aiden was getting in my truck in the next 60 seconds. He took out his phone, I took out mine, and called 911. I told the dispatcher my name, my location, and that there was a group of children, at least 12 that I could see, performing field labor on a private property under what appeared to be false pretenses, that my son had been brought there without my consent, and that I was requesting a sheriff's deputy immediately. I said it clearly, and I said it loud enough for the director to hear every word. He stopped smiling. While we waited, I walked Aiden back to my truck and got him a water bottle from the cooler I keep behind the seat. He drank most of it in one go. I gave him the granola bar I had in the center console. He ate it in 4 bites. "How long have you been out in the field today?" I asked. "Since after breakfast," he said. "It was hot by like 9. It was now almost 4 in the afternoon. Were you all out here every day?" He nodded. "In the mornings we do Bible study, and then after lunch we come out here. They said it's service, that it builds character. Did anyone get sick?" He was quiet for a second. "Marcus got really dizzy on Tuesday, and they made him sit under the tree for a while. And a girl, I don't know her name, she was little. She was crying a lot one afternoon, and one of the counselors took her inside." I made myself breathe through my nose. A Bossier Parish Sheriff's deputy arrived about 20 minutes after I called. Her name was Deputy Landry, mid-30s, short hair. Moved like someone who's been doing this long enough to read a situation fast. She spoke with me first, then with the director. Then she walked through the property, which I watched from my truck with Aiden. She came back looking different than she'd left. Quieter, more careful. "Mr. Decker," she said, "I'm going to need you to give a formal statement, and I'm going to have some of my colleagues come out here." She paused. "How old did you say your son is?" 10. She wrote something in her notepad. "And you had no knowledge of this work program?" "None." She wrote again. "Then your son mentioned something to me about another boy who wasn't feeling well this week." "Marcus," I said. She looked up. "He's still on the property. He didn't look good." I thought about Aiden drinking that water bottle like he hadn't had enough to drink all day. I thought about the girl with the big still eyes looking back down at the ground. "How many kids are out here?" I asked. 14, she said. "Ranging from about 8 to 14 years old. None of the parents I've been able to reach so far were aware of the labor component of the program. It turned out to be 16 children once the full count was done. The youngest was 7 years old, out in a Louisiana soybean field in August, because she'd been brought to what her parents thought was a week of scripture study and team-building activities. The flyer had said, 'Grow in faith. Grow as a leader. Covenant Rise Fellowship's Youth Formation Week. Building character through service and community.' Service. They called it service. The director had a whole system. The participation agreement buried the labor component on page 4 of a 6-page document, described as hands-on stewardship activities as part of the program curriculum. Parents signed because they trusted their church. Parents signed because it was a lot of pages and the font was small and the word stewardship didn't ring any alarms. Parents signed because they'd been attending Covenant Rise for years and they believed in its leadership. I found out later that the farm had a contract with a regional agricultural co-op and that the director had been filing the produce yields, soybeans, some squash, some green beans depending on the season, as a tax-exempt charitable harvest for going on 5 years. The children were, in the language of his accounting, volunteers, free labor, classified as ministry. I've thought about that word a lot, ministry. Sheila drove out to the property within an hour of me calling her. She sat in her car for a while before she came over to where Aiden and I were. When she got out, she was white in the face and her hands weren't quite steady. "I didn't know," she said. "I know," I said. And I did know. I want to be clear about that because it would be easy, and it was easy, in those first few hours, to turn toward her with everything I felt and make her the place where it landed. But she was a mother who'd been lied to by people she trusted, same as the other parents, and she was standing in a field looking at her son's cracked lips and dirty hands, and I could see what that was doing to her. We didn't need to fight. Not then. What we needed to do was take Aiden home. Deputy Landry and 3 other deputies spent the rest of the afternoon and into the evening on the property. Child Protective Services sent 2 workers out within a couple hours. All 16 children were released to their parents by nightfall. The director was detained for questioning, and by the following Monday, he and 2 program staff members had been formally charged, among other things, with felony child labor violations and obtaining consent by fraud. I didn't find that out all at once. It came in pieces over the following weeks, through phone calls from the DA's office and updates from the parents' group that formed informally out of the whole situation. 16 families bound together by one terrible week and a 6-page document nobody had read closely enough. Marcus's parents pressed separate charges related to his health. He'd been having headaches all week that the staff had dismissed, and a doctor confirmed mild heat exhaustion. The 7-year-old's family had a lawyer within 48 hours. I stayed in Shreveport for the rest of my rotation leave. I slept on the couch at the house on Millbrook Drive. Sheila and I agreed on that without a lot of discussion because Aiden needed both of us close, and neither of us needed to be fighting about arrangements in front of him. We got him into a therapist the following week. A woman who had a practice in Metairie, who worked with kids, warm office, books everywhere, a white noise machine outside the door. The first week, he was quiet in a way he hadn't been before. Not sad, exactly. Careful, watching things more than he usually did. He ate a lot, which made my chest ache in a complicated way. Watching a kid eat because he's making up for something. He didn't talk much about the farm at first. Then one evening he asked me to come sit on the back porch with him while he was setting up his crawfish traps, and he said, without looking at me, "Dad, there was a boy there who said his parents weren't coming. He said they sent him there because they needed a break." I didn't say anything. I let him keep going. His name was... I don't know his last name. First name's Patrick. He was 12. He said he'd been to the program before, the summer before, and no one came early that time either. Aiden tied off a knot in the trap wire. When you came across the field, I thought you were coming to yell at me for something, because they kept telling us our parents knew. And then I thought, maybe you did know. Maybe that's just what it is. He said it matter-of-factly, like he was reporting data. Kids do that sometimes with the things that hurt them worst. They find a tone that's almost flat, as a kind of protection. I didn't know, I said, and I want you to understand something. The second I knew, I was in that field. There was not 1 second between me knowing and me coming for you. He nodded. He worked on the trap for a minute. Patrick didn't have anyone come, he said. Patrick's situation was complicated in ways that took several more weeks to untangle. He was in a temporary guardianship arrangement with his grandmother, who had cognitive decline that had worsened over the past year. She'd signed the forms at the recommendation of their church deacon without fully understanding what she was signing. It came out later in the CPS investigation. I don't know all the details of what happened to him after. I know he wasn't sent back to that farm. I know there was an extended family member who got involved. I hope that's enough. I've had to learn, slowly, that I can't hold every outcome in my hands. By September, Aiden was back in school and back to his Legos. He started bringing his trapeze drawings to the therapist, these elaborate architectural diagrams he'd make of Lego cities, and apparently that opened something up for them to talk through. I don't know what was said in those sessions. I didn't ask. That's his room, those conversations. What I know is that one Saturday in late September, I drove over to the house, and he met me in the driveway with a new Lego set still in the box, the kind with 1,200 pieces, and he held it up and said, "Dad, can we do this today?" In exactly that voice, that 9 words or less practical boy voice that means he's okay, that means he's himself. "Yeah," I said, "we can definitely do that." We sat at the kitchen table for 4 hours. I lost 3 pieces and he found them all. Sheila made grilled cheese sandwiches at some point and put a plate between us without saying anything and went back to what she was doing. It was such an ordinary afternoon. I kept having to look down at the Lego instructions so he wouldn't see my face. The case against the director is still working its way through the courts. I've given 2 formal depositions. I'll give more if I need to. I've talked to other parents in the group who are doing the same. 16 families, 16 different stories of trust, misplaced, and documents signed in good faith, and a summer that won't be entirely right for a while. People ask me sometimes what the warning signs were. They want a list, something they can check against their own lives, their own churches, their own participation agreements. I understand why they want that. I want it too. Looking back, the pause on the phone when I said I was coming home early, the slow response to the text asking for an address, the program flyer that used words like stewardship and formation in ways that sounded meaningful but were designed to slide past. But mostly the warning sign was the thing I almost didn't do. 40 minutes down the highway, window down, thinking about burgers, and then something shifted and I took the exit. I don't know what that was. I've called it instinct, but that word doesn't quite cover it. I've called it luck, but I don't like the implication of that the other families, the ones who didn't have someone come early, were unlucky rather than deceived. What I know is this. If you feel that pressure behind your eyes, that low-grade alarm that doesn't have a specific sound yet, pull over. Take the exit. Make the call. Don't wait until Sunday. Aiden's doing well. He's 11 now, and the gap in his teeth closed up last spring, and he's moved from Legos to building actual birdhouses in the garage, which means I have to put everything down and go help him every time he needs a second set of hands on a clamp, and I am not complaining about that. I'm not complaining about that at all. We set the crawfish traps again last weekend. He caught 4. He made me take a picture before he threw them back because he wanted the documentation. That's my kid. I've thought a lot about what kind of man drives 40 minutes down a highway thinking about burgers and then pulls over. I don't think I'm a particularly heroic person. I work pipeline. I'm gone 6 weeks at a time. I've missed birthdays, school plays, the kind of ordinary Tuesday nights that add up to a childhood. Those are real costs, and I've paid them. And so has Aiden. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise just because the story ended okay. It didn't end okay because I'm some exceptional father. It ended the way it did because I took an exit I almost didn't take, and because a deputy named Landry decided to walk the full property instead of taking the director's word for things, and because Aiden had enough of himself left to look across a soybean field and recognize his father's face. That last part is what I keep coming back to. He'd been told for days that I knew, that I'd agreed, that the forms had my signature. And some part of him still wasn't entirely sure which version of me was real, the one who signed the papers or the one crossing the field. That's what dishonest people do to children. They plant doubt in the place where trust is supposed to live. They use the authority a parent has with a kid and they invert it, they weaponize it. They make a child question the one thing that should be solid ground. The director didn't get away with it because he was clever. He got away with it for 5 years because people are inclined to trust institutions that use the right language: stewardship, formation, service, character. These are good words. They've been good words in a lot of mouths before his. He knew that. He picked them carefully. And 16 families signed documents they didn't read carefully enough because the words on the outside match what they already believed about the place. I'm not saying those families were foolish. I'm saying that trust, when it's placed in something that has earned it over years, becomes a kind of shortcut the mind takes, and people who want to exploit that know exactly where the shortcut is. What I learned, not as a lesson printed on a poster, but as something that sat in my chest for weeks after, is that vigilance isn't the opposite of trust. It's what makes trust mean something. You can believe in people and still read the document. You can have faith in a community and still ask exactly where your kid is sleeping, who has authority over him, what the days look like hour by hour. Those questions aren't suspicion. They're love with its eyes open. Aiden asked me once out on the back porch with his crawfish traps whether I felt bad about not knowing sooner. I told him the truth, yes, every day. And then I told him the other truth, which is that the only direction that guilt is useful is forward. You feel it, you understand what it's pointing at, and then you make the next decision better. That's all any of us can do, really. Feel what's true, understand why, and move better because of it. He's 11 now. He builds birdhouses. He still talks with his hands when he gets excited. The gap in his teeth closed up on its own. I take the exits now. Everyone that asks to be taken.